March 5th, 1936, Eastleigh Aerodrome, Southampton, England. A thin mist curls across the runway like smoke from some distant battle. Mechanics in oil-stained overalls stamp their boots against the cold, eyes fixed on a sleek silver prototype waiting at the end of the strip. The aircraft gleams beneath the morning sun, slender, almost fragile, its wings curving like a falcon's. This is the Supermarine Type 300, the machine that will one day be known as the Spitfire. Captain Joseph "Mutt" Summers, a veteran test pilot with the cool nerves of a gambler, climbs into the cockpit. The onlookers, Royal Air Force officers in blue wool and engineers with grease on their sleeves, trade quiet doubts. "Pretty little thing," one officer murmurs, "but it looks too delicate for war." "A racing plane," another scoffs, "not a fighter." The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine coughs, sputters, then catches, a deep, smooth growl that drowns the chatter. Summers eases the throttle forward, the propeller blurs, the tail lifts, and in seconds the Silverbird leaps from the runway. The crowd watches in stunned silence as it climbs, banking hard into a wide loop that glints against the pale clouds. The sound it makes is different, sharper, cleaner, alive. When Summers brings her down again, he coasts to a stop and pops the canopy. A voice calls out from the line of officers, "How does she fly, Mutt?" Summers grins, removes his goggles, and answers with quiet certainty, "Don't touch a thing." For a heartbeat, there is only the ticking of the cooling engine. The men exchange glances, half disbelief, half wonder. They still don't realize it, but they've just witnessed the birth of Britain's most iconic defender. A toy plane, they called it. 4 years later, it will stand between them and invasion. 1937-1938, London and Southampton. The Spitfire's first flight had dazzled everyone who saw it, but in the cold offices of the Air Ministry, excitement quickly gave way to skepticism. To most senior officers, it was an exotic experiment. Beautiful, yes, but impractical for war. At the time, the British Empire still saw the world through the lens of the Great War, where lumbering biplanes had ruled the skies and dogfights were fought at a walking pace compared to the speeds now possible. The new generation of engineers, led by Reginald J. Mitchell, were trying to convince men born of another era that the future belonged to speed, aerodynamics, and precision engineering. Mitchell, sharp-eyed, chain-smoking, relentless, had designed the Spitfire as if he could already see the next war coming. His creation was more than metal. It was motion made flesh. Its elliptical wings were a masterpiece of aerodynamics, giving it unmatched maneuverability. Its retractable landing gear and enclosed cockpit were cutting-edge innovations. But to traditionalists in the RAF, it all looked too fragile, too risky, too expensive. In one internal memo, an Air Commodore dismissed it bluntly. "This Spitfire is a fine technical exercise, but we need aircraft that can be built by the hundreds, not sculptures for the air." The irony was cruel. Even as the Air Ministry hesitated, Hitler's Luftwaffe was growing like a storm on the horizon. In Munich, in Nuremberg, in Berlin, new aircraft rolled off assembly lines faster than Britain could count them. Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Heinkel bombers, Junkers dive bombers. Europe could already hear the echo of engines that would soon darken its skies. Mitchell knew it. He worked himself to exhaustion, pushing his team at Supermarine Aviation Works day and night. When he fell ill with cancer in 1937, doctors begged him to rest. He refused. "If I don't finish this plane," he told his engineers quietly, "someone else will finish the war." He died at 42, never seeing his creation take flight in combat. But his final design, polished, perfected, and powered by that roaring Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, would soon roll off production lines across Britain. By 1939, as Germany invaded Poland and war came crashing across Europe, the same commanders who once laughed at the Spitfire now signed desperate orders for hundreds of them. And when the first air raid sirens wailed over Britain in the summer of 1940, the toy plane would finally prove its worth in fire, speed, and defiance. July 10th, 1940, over the English Channel. The sun is just breaking through the clouds when the first formation of Heinkel He-111 bombers appears, silver daggers against a pale sky. They're flanked by squadrons of Messerschmitt Bf-109s, Germany's finest. Below them, the waters of the Channel shimmer like glass. Ahead lies England, the last unconquered fortress of Europe. At RAF Tangmere, the scramble bell screams. Pilots leap from their bunks and sprint for their aircraft, boots slapping across the tarmac. Ground crews yank chocks from the wheels, fueling hoses still hanging loose. Engines roar to life, Merlins growling in unison. Flight Lieutenant Alan Deere, a New Zealander with 54 Squadron, slams his canopy shut and guns the throttle. The Spitfire leaps forward, its slender wings slicing through the dawn air. Control, this is Red Leader. Bandits sighted, Angels 15. The Battle of Britain has begun. At first contact, the air erupts. Contrails twist into white ribbons as aircraft dive and climb, their machine guns stitching lines of smoke through the clouds. The Messerschmitts attack from above, faster, heavier, deadly in a dive. But the Spitfire is alive. It rolls, turns, and climbs with a grace that defies physics. Its elliptical wings, so often mocked, now let it change direction faster than anything else in the sky. Its pilot doesn't fly it so much as wear it. "Brake right! Brake right!" Deere shouts into the radio, pulling his Spitfire into a violent turn that slams him into his harness. A BF-109 flashes past, too slow to follow. Deere loops behind, squeezes the trigger, and watches tracer rounds walk across the German's fuselage. The Messerschmitt explodes in a flash of orange. Down below, farmers pause in their fields as burning aircraft tumble through the clouds. Across the south coast, the sky is a living battlefield. From his command post at RAF Uxbridge, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park listens to radio chatter flood through the speakers, call signs, bearings, desperate cries for help. Every available Spitfire and Hurricane is in the air. Every man is flying on the edge of exhaustion. "How many left in reserve?" Park asks quietly. "None, sir," comes the answer. Yet somehow the line holds. By nightfall, the bombers turn back, mauled, scattered, their escorts lost or dead. The few Spitfires that limp home are blackened with soot, their wings pocked with bullet holes. Mechanics work through the dark, patching them with whatever metal they can find. Inside the mess hall, the pilots collapse into chairs. Some pour tea, others whiskey. A young flyer stares blankly at the wall, his hands still trembling. "They called her a toy," Deere mutters, lighting a cigarette. "Tell that to the ones who didn't make it back." The Battle of Britain will rage for months. London will burn, thousands will die, but the enemy will never land. Because every time the sirens wail, a few dozen Spitfires will claw their way into the sky, fragile, graceful, and utterly relentless. And every time, the fate of a nation will ride on their wings. August 1940, Southern England. The war has come home. Each morning, the sirens wail over London, Portsmouth, Southampton, and Dover. Bombs fall like rain. Fire engines scream through streets already glowing red. Yet every dawn, through the haze of smoke and dust, the Spitfires rise again. From Biggin Hill to Hornchurch, from Tangmere to Kenley, the airfields are alive with chaos. Ground crews barely sleep, refueling, rearming, repairing. Pilots doze in the cockpits, waiting for the next scramble. And always, always, the engines thunder to life. At 18,000 feet, Flight Lieutenant Alan Deere and his wingman spot a formation of Dornier Doe 17s heading for the coast. Dozens of German bombers glinting in the morning sun, escorted by Messerschmitt 109s. "Enemy bombers, 12 o'clock high," Deere shouts. The Spitfires dive from above, sunlight flashing across their canopies. The air erupts in chaos. Tracer rounds streak like sparks across the sky. Deere banks hard, rolling between two bombers so close he can see the faces of the German gunners. He squeezes the trigger. The 303 Brownings chatter and one Dornier bursts into flame. It tumbles toward the sea, smoke trailing behind like a comet. All around him, the sky is alive with the sound of battle, the scream of engines, the hammer of guns, the hiss of burning fuel. Below on the ground, people stop to watch. Children point skyward from London rooftops. Civilians gather in open fields, eyes fixed on the spiraling duels above. The RAF's struggle becomes their own. For every Spitfire that falls, another climbs into the fray. By mid-August, the toll is devastating. Squadrons lose half their men in a week. Replacement pilots, some barely trained, arrive straight from flight school. They learn in the sky or die trying. But still the line holds. The Spitfire's Merlin engine, now fine-tuned to perfection, gives it a razor edge. In level flight, it can match the BF-109. In a climb, it can outturn it. The German pilots call it the best British bird, a grudging respect born of terror. Inside the Luftwaffe's command post in France, frustration boils. "These English, they never stop," one bomber commander snarls after another failed raid on London. Their little Spitfires appear from nowhere, like wasps. Hitler grows impatient. The Luftwaffe shifts tactics, bombing cities instead of airfields, a fatal mistake. It gives the RAF time to breathe, to rebuild, to fight another day. By September, radar operators at Fighter Command can barely keep up. Dozens of enemy formations cross the channel daily, but the RAF intercepts nearly all of them. Every interception means more Spitfires rising, more pilots risking everything for one more day of freedom. And on September 15, 1940, that risk finally pays off. At 11 a.m., the largest Luftwaffe raid of the war surges toward London, over 1,000 aircraft. Churchill watches from the underground control room at Uxbridge as his squadrons launch one after another. "Are there any reserves?" he asks. Air Vice Marshal Keith Park answers quietly, "There are none." Still the Spitfires climb. The air over London turns into a storm of metal and fire. German bombers fall burning into the Thames. By afternoon, the invasion that was meant to crush Britain is broken in the sky. As the last enemy planes turn for home, Churchill utters the words that will echo through history. Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. The few he spoke of were the men of Fighter Command and their toy planes called Spitfires. Autumn 1940, across the British Isles. The skies are quiet now, but the silence is uneasy, a kind of exhaustion that settles into the bones. Bombed-out streets smolder under gray clouds, and yet, somewhere above, the faint hum of a Merlin engine still echoes like a heartbeat. Britain has survived, barely. At airfields across southern England, the men who made it through the Battle of Britain stand beside their Spitfires, staring at the pockmarked fuselages and shredded propellers. Mechanics patch the bullet holes with sheets of aluminum. Kids from nearby villages sneak up to the fences just to glimpse the aircraft that became their country's guardian angel. A squadron leader leans against the wing of his plane, cigarette in hand, watching the horizon where the enemy used to come from. "They called her a toy once," he mutters, "but she fought like a lion." He's right. In the span of a few short months, the Spitfire has gone from being a curiosity, a delicate experiment, to a weapon of myth. Its elliptical wings that once seemed too fragile became symbols of grace and defiance. Its Merlin engine, tuned to a fierce, almost musical growl, became the sound of hope for an entire nation. Every time those engines roared overhead, Londoners looked up and cheered. Every child who traced their path through the clouds knew, as long as the Spitfires flew, Britain still stood. For the Luftwaffe, the lesson was bitter. Their losses had become unsustainable. The invasion fleet assembled along the French coast quietly dispersed. Hitler turned his attention east toward Russia, but in truth, his defeat had already begun, here in the skies over southern England. From that point on, the Spitfire became more than a plane. It was an icon, a masterpiece of engineering and courage fused into one elegant shape. It would evolve through dozens of variants, faster, deadlier, fighting across North Africa, over Malta and Normandy, and all the way to Berlin. But its legend was born in those desperate months of 1940. Years later, even hardened RAF veterans would speak of it with reverence. One pilot said, "She was alive. You didn't fly her, she carried you." And for those who once doubted her, the irony was undeniable. The same commanders who dismissed the Spitfire as a toy were now the ones who pinned medals on the men who flew her, who toasted to her name in smoky mess halls, who watched her glide overhead during victory parades with tears in their eyes. When the war finally ended, Britain lay scarred, its cities bombed, its people weary, but unconquered. And high above the rubble, the silhouette of a Spitfire still danced in the clouds, sunlight flashing along her wings like a salute to every life that had depended on her. It was not built for war alone, it was built for survival, for speed, for freedom, for the stubborn, unbreakable heart of a nation that refused to fall. The men who first laughed at the Spitfire could never have imagined that this toy plane would one day save the world's oldest democracy, and perhaps the world itself. Summer, 1945. Duxford Airfield, Cambridgeshire. The war in Europe is over. The hangars are quiet now, the once frantic hum of mechanics replaced by the songs of birds in the hedgerows. Rows of Supermarine Spitfires stand parked beneath the soft English sun, their paint chipped, their wings still scarred with the history they wrote. For the first time in years, the men who flew them can simply stand and look. Flight Lieutenant Alan Deere runs his hand along the cool metal skin of his aircraft. Beneath his palm, he can still feel the tremors of its engine, hear the echo of that unforgettable sound, the howl of the Merlin that once filled the skies of Britain. The Spitfire, he thinks, was more than a machine. It was a companion, fast, fierce, and faithful. All around him, veterans gather. They are older now, faces lined by exhaustion, eyes carrying ghosts of smoke and fire. Some joke, others fall silent. They all know what the world owes this airplane. Without her, one mechanic says quietly, we'd be speaking German right now. He's only half joking. Across Britain, the Spitfire has become legend. Newspapers print its silhouette alongside the words, "The fighter that saved a nation." School children build models of it from wood and tin. Artists paint it soaring through golden clouds. Even in the ruins of London, people stop and look up whenever one flies overhead, as if the sound itself is proof that they survived. In the years that follow, the Spitfire remains in service. In Korea, in the Middle East, in the far reaches of the Commonwealth. It trains new pilots, defends new skies, but it never again fights a battle as desperate as the one over its homeland. Its legacy, though, continues far beyond the war. The Spitfire inspires generations of engineers, designers, and dreamers. It becomes a symbol of elegance and function, of what happens when art and necessity meet in the crucible of survival. When Winston Churchill later tours an RAF base, he pauses beneath one of the preserved fighters, its nose gleaming under hangar lights. He murmurs to his aide, "The British spirit cast in aluminum," and he's right. The Spitfire was Britain, graceful yet unyielding, modest yet deadly, beautiful and brave all at once. Even now, decades later, at air shows and memorials, when one of them takes to the sky, the familiar whine of its propeller, the shimmer of its elliptical wings, the crowd falls silent. Old men lift their eyes, children cover their ears, and for a few precious seconds, time folds back. The plane that was once mocked as a toy reminds the world what it meant to fight and to endure. Because in 1936 it was just an idea. In 1940 it was Britain's last defense. And today it is immortality made of metal and sound. The Spitfire didn't just win a battle, it preserved a civilization. It carried the hopes of millions and never once let them fall.